UUs have a struggle every year with Easter. We don't know what quite to do. Should we venerate the bunny rabbit, or should we let the kids chase after the eggs, the hidden eggs? Should we look at the subject of Easter in a very careful way so as to not to offend? Though our religious tradition cites specifically the Jewish and Christian teachings as sources of inspiration for our tradition, and though our tradition was rooted in the Christian movement, and though even right now, especially in New England, there are a significant percentage of UUs that identify as Christians, and even though one of the oldest churches in America, King's Chapel in Boston, is distinctly Christian and UU, we still have a bit of identity crisis when it comes to Easter. I think it is unprofitable to argue what is right or wrong about Easter, which story is superior or better, or more precisely and faithfully captures the spirit of the time. But I would simply like to share with you what Easter symbolizes for me. Now, I was raised United Methodist. I never heard of a Unitarian Universalist until I was about 29 years of age. And in my 20s, I was a bona fide United Methodist minister, as was my family. And I sort of grew out of that perspective, and now I would identify myself as spiritual, but not particularly religious. And I sometimes think people who have a spiritual sense of life perhaps get at the core of what Christianity is really all about, as well as the other religions help illuminate that too. I feel no need to get into an argument or debate with anyone about which faith is better or worse, or whether non-faith at all, an atheistic or agnostic stance or versus a fundamentalist status. I have no interest whatsoever in an argument about what people believe and whether it is better or worse than others, because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that what really matters is what a person does and says every day of their life. Because what a person does and says is who they are. I've seen atheists who act like saints and Christian fundamentalists who act like demons and everything in between. I respect all religions. My brother is an agnostic, barely, and my sister is United Methodist in Ocala, Florida, and she and her husband go to church faithfully, and her husband is a usher every Sunday they go, and it really matters to them. I respect everybody's religious viewpoint. I have cousins in St. Augustine who are devout Catholics, and I love them. I don't understand their faith, but I appreciate what it does for them. Having said that, let me share with you what I think Easter is about for me. And whenever I talk about my beliefs, it's not so that I can persuade someone else that they should think that too. It is to stimulate the thinking of others so that they might strive to be clear about what it is they believe as an individual. But having said that, let me share with you how I understand the Easter story. First, I have to drink this water. I begin with the fact that every single one of us has needs. These needs cannot be eliminated for 1 second. They must be addressed and fulfilled as a human being. And this is one thing that makes us all part of one family. At the most basic level, we need water, such as I just demonstrated, nourishment, oxygen, and other elemental needs of life. On top of those needs are the needs for resources to survive, the companionship of family, of community, social support, and basic security. On top of those needs, a higher level is the need for respect, validation, the positive regard of others, the ability to fit somewhere in the social structure so that one is not isolated. And a layer above those, and with every layer, we're dealing with something that is less of immediate urgency of need. But as we go to a higher level, there is the need for meaning, purpose, hope, and unconditional love for oneself and for others. Some people talk of there being a layer above that for the need for self-actualization and transcendence of self and so on. That is sometimes controversial. But at any rate, those first layers, 3 or 4 layers I mentioned, are who we are. And it's not going to change. And it's the same with every human being, whoever we meet, anywhere on this planet. A human being cannot live without the fulfillment of those basic needs. However, the higher needs for purpose and meaning and for validation, if they are abruptly threatened or thwarted, it poses a serious problem. It jeopardizes our well-being. It can jeopardize our mental stability. It can certainly jeopardize our peace, and it can even affect our health. Because paradoxically, something as ephemeral as a belief can actually impact our health, as many studies have shown. These threats to meaning and purpose and hope usually come in the form of any threat of loss or the experience of loss. All of us here have known personal losses. Some of those losses we cannot speak about to others. All of us have seen the losses of those we love, either as a relative or a friend, and sometimes the tragedies we see others endure affect us in a way that is equal to it affecting us personally. There are devastating things which happen to human beings. I, as a minister, see it weekly. We face things that can shatter us, that can threaten how we understand the world, which take away, which rob us of the ability to see the world and our place in it in a positive way. Losses can occur on a personal or societal level. 9/11 was an instance, for example, of a threat to our moral and our sense of decency on a profound level throughout the country. And now let me bring this back to the story of Easter. If we are to follow the text of the Bible, and thank God, now I get to use some of my seminary education that I paid so much for. At this point, it's a rare event, but I get to do it in a UU church. If one just takes at face value the story of the Gospels, the crucifixion was an utterly devastating, catastrophic event that's hard to imagine. It was the end of the world certain people had devoted their lives to. A community had developed around Jesus based on compassion, empathy, justice, forgiveness, the renewal of life. But its leader was humiliated and put to death by a government that represented utter brutality and the assertion of power, controlled by men who were themselves controlled by delusion, grandiosity. And in that evil spirit, if you will, they put to death a person seeking justice and compassion. And that was utterly devastating if we put ourselves into the story of the Bible. That was utterly devastating and a total annihilation of their sense of meaning, purpose, of affirmation, fulfillment, community, and fairness. The resurrection faith represents a transformation of the absolute catastrophe of the crucifixion into a faith and into a practice that what Jesus represented, what they cherished so profoundly, would not die. The belief in resurrection is part and parcel of a deeply human phenomenon that exists even in this moment, even in this community, that what is precious to us, we will not let perish. We see this human impulse to transform tragedy into something that promotes life throughout history. Emil Fackenheim, a professor of philosophy at the University of Toronto and a Reformed rabbi, wrestled all of his life with the utterly catastrophic event of the Holocaust to the Jewish people. In his book, To Mend the World, he wrote, "We are forbidden." He was speaking to his Jewish brethren. He said, "We are forbidden finally, in the light of this horrific event, to despair of the world, lest we help make it a meaningless place in which God is dead or irrelevant and everything is permitted. To abandon any of these imperatives in response to Hitler's victory at Auschwitz would be to hand him, Hitler, yet another posthumous victory." Now here's the connection with us. Despite all losses, defeats, and shattering experiences, life summons us to live and survive, to have hope, to be resilient, and to summon the courage to live in the face of doubt and insecurity, and to preserve with all of our might those things we care most deeply about. Life summons us to make meaning even out of emptiness by renewing life despite death and loss. We already here, I believe, practice the resurrection faith. Despite injustice and the craziness of this world, here we are talking about covenants, holding up a plaque of the covenant, creating 7 covenants and trying to create a beloved community and ensure its survival. Here we are talking about Black Lives Matter in a world where the majority of whites don't care about it. Here we are talking about peace in a world that seems to be adrift in the seas of war. Here we are. Here we are. I think this congregation has been through some ups and downs, and yet here you are. Here you are with the leader of one of your committees standing before you and in moving words saying, despite my limitations, I am increasing my pledge because I believe in the future. Whether we acknowledge it or not, what we are doing represents a kind of faith. And by faith, I mean a basic trust. This basic trust is not based on empirical evidence or reason or scientific evidence. Rather, it is a basic trust in life that despite all the horrors, difficulties, and tragedies of life, life is trying to organize itself around hope, purpose, compassion, justice, and empathy, and not hate, evil, and destruction. It is a basic faith, which some would call faith, because without empirical evidence, it summons us to act as though the ultimate goal in life is to bring peace, well-being, joy, and the harmony of all living things to fruition. These are things we have pledged, we have vowed, shall not perish from the earth. And thus we are like that early Christian community, having the resurrection faith as well. The community, the people who surround us, the encouragement of others plays an enormously important role in fostering this basic trust I have described. There is a connection between the basic trust I described, the resurgence of life in the spring, and the resilience of all living beings.